put it here. Hello, Declan.
Hello, Roman.
Thank you very much for talking to me and to my audience. And the reason we are talking now is a special event that happened at 7th of October, a trance festival, Nova, and people who were dancing and praying for love and peace were attacked by terrorists, were killed, murdered, and those from them who survived in a severe state of trauma. So the reason I called you, that I know that this is what are you doing. You are helping such people, not only in such circumstances, but it's not a new thing for you, like spiritual crisis. I think that's something new here, because it's spiritual crisis happened after being connected and in a time realm. So first of all, I would say that Declan Hammond, he is a former director of Irish School for Classical Homeopathy. And I met you first 25 or more years ago in Tel Aviv. And I till now, I remember your seminar. And part of your seminar, you described remedies, homeopathic remedies from drugs. Actually, from you, first time in my life, I heard the word ayahuasca. It was a strange word, thank you. And the rest is history. So, Declan, please tell me how we can help these people.
By opening our hearts and by feeling all of the feelings that we need to feel, and to be present to everything that's available. For me, my life and my passion is supporting people in extreme challenge. And the work that I do at festivals is really supporting people who really go to these festivals. These are festivals called transformation festivals. I spent many of the last 20 years working at festivals like this, where people gather together, usually taking some psychedelic drugs, to open their hearts, to open their spirits, taking substances like MDMA, ecstasy, to open their hearts, to connect with each other, to transform, to heal, to come together, to help each other to transform, to create a new culture, where young people have the vision of a new culture to try to create these things. Now, not everyone is prepared to open their spirit, to open their heart. So these environments where people gather together, and one festival I work with in Portugal creates an atmosphere where a dance floor with 30,000 people dance together in unison, in trance, connecting with the view to connect to love, to connect with healing, to open it up. This is an experience that for many people is completely life-changing. For some people, they are not prepared for it. It's overwhelming. It's the substances they take are too strong. They're not prepared. They haven't done the personal work to be able to stay connected with themselves and the ground while they're having an experience of a heart opening, consciousness opening situation, and they become traumatized. So we have a modality called PsyCare, PSY care, which creates an environment at the festivals where people who are having challenging experiences can be looked after. So at Boom Festival in Portugal, it's like the mothership for these particular kinds of festivals. We have 160, 165 different nationalities come together in this. So of the 50,000 people who come to the festival, and the festival lasts for a whole week, 1% of those, what we call boomers from Boom Festival, are deeply challenged and traumatized by their experience. And some of those are because of the intensity of the experience, or because the substance they've had, or for lots of different reasons, they get into challenging situations. So in Portugal, we're a team of 95 people, and I'm part of the medical team that supports it. We have psychiatrists, homeopaths, we have different therapists who work together, and people who have had also their own challenging experiences. We don't ask for people with medical qualifications to do the jobs, although maybe a third of the people are medics and maybe a quarter are psychiatrists. The most important thing is that the people we work with are the fellow therapists, are the carers. They are people who've had challenging experiences themselves and who've managed to process. So this is for me, this is a core criterion of doing the work, is that we've actually managed to deal with challenging experiences ourselves. So this was the comment I made at the beginning. The most important thing is that we integrate these challenging experiences ourselves, that we're not acting into these situations as professional, with the professional hat and a professional detachment. It's true compassion. I'm sitting with you. I had my own experiences in my personal life. I had some huge challenging experiences that really brought me to the place of madness. And having come through that experience, I've been able to sit with people, and I do on a daily basis, not just at festivals with my patients, to sit with people in hugely challenging experiences where they've experiences of horror, terror, dissociation, disconnection, depersonalization, all of these different experiences. Now, those can happen in people's normal lives, but at the festivals, the environments are so intense. People are gathering together, substances are involved, and all of these things create a really, really intense set of challenges. So we work with people, and the environments we create, we keep people safe. So we allow them to have their experience, their intense experience. Part of my work is training psychiatrists that even though what people present with looks like a psychotic outburst, looks like a schizophrenic situation, people are seeing things other people can't see, they're hearing voices, they're having experiences that are not part of the normal experiences for people. So from a psychiatric perspective, that looks like somebody's gone mad. They are temporarily insane. So you can use a label like toxic psychosis, but that really doesn't understand what's really going on there. What's really going on are people are massively challenged. They have what we call in transpersonal psychology, they're having a spiritual emergency situation. Now, that is something that requires a great quality of compassion to be present with. And we don't talk about the people who come to us in the festival. We don't talk to them as our patients. They're our guests. So we treat them as our guests. We don't talk about ourselves as therapists. We're sitters. So our job is to sit with people. Our job is not to fix people. And a big part of my work is training the medical people in the festival to not go there to fix people. If we're the first step, and for me, this is the essence of not just prescribing homeopathically, but being homeopathic, to be present with people in their suffering, to really be present from a place of compassion, from a place of, yes, I get you. So the healing presence of somebody who can sit calmly while somebody is having a deep experience of spiritual emergency. They could be screaming, they can be in a shock, they could be in terror, they can be hearing, seeing things other people can't see, but massive, massive distress. The greatest gift that we give our guests is our loving presence. Being grounded, being present, really feeling whatever is happening, not being there as a professional, but being there as a fellow human being, being present, being in our heart. soft heart, open heart, and soft belly, being able to breathe and to stay present. That's one of the greatest gifts. And sometimes at the festival, the experiences people have, they can get over these experiences in a few hours. Sometimes it takes days, of sitting, of being together. Yeah. I prescribe remedies in those situations, but the most important remedy that I have to offer is my compassion, my love, and bringing that into it. That is, for me, the highest potency medicine. Love, working from that kind of place, and what I hear going back to these festivals, I meet people year after year who's, I go to the festival. Oh, do you remember me in 2012? And every year we work with in Boom Festival in Portugal, maybe 500 people during the course of the week festival. So 1% of the people who come to the festival will have these spiritual emergency, these psychic crises, and so we support them. And I hear again and again and again from people who said that night of hell, those days of horror, those days of absolute madness, the care, the support, the remedies, but most importantly, the love that I experienced at that time changed my life. And we know this as homeopaths, the deepest trauma, when it's handled in a good way, is potentially the greatest healing. So if we can be with people and journey with them into the depths of their suffering, be present with them in the depths of the pain, and really be there with them, that for me is the essence of homeopathy. Similar suffering, being together, not going in there to fix them, not going in there to find what's the remedy, what's the rubric. How present can I be with this person? How much can I open my heart and feel the feelings, feel the pain, feel the suffering, feel the terror, feel the horror? How much can I allow myself to feel? How present can I be with those feelings in myself? That's the greatest remedy we can give our patients. And of course, we have other remedies that we need to work with. But I hear people have given me all sorts of names, the wizard, the angel, all sorts of names, not because of my remedies, but because what they experienced is the presence that we can bring. And to all my colleagues working in those situations, my heart really goes out to you. Yeah, I was attending a Billy festival in Ireland the night before that horrible situation at Novum. I was aware that there was a festival going on. People who would have been involved with the Boom Festival in Portugal were involved with the community in Israel. And to wake up to hear that people being in an ecstatic place of connection, meeting the horror, my heart broke. And my heart really broke into that. And I couldn't imagine the horror that could be in those situations. But I know from experience, meeting people, who've had experience of terror and horror, spiritual emergency. For me, this is a much more respectful term, because psychiatry will have labels like people have become psychotic, they have become terrorized, their psyche has cracked open. From transpersonal psychology, the idea of a spiritual emergency, this is much more respectful for the experience. I felt that, and I know that the work that I've done with people in these really extreme states at festivals, they've been states that have been caused by their experience, by the environment, but it doesn't matter to me what the actual cause of those states are. Whether the cause has been confronted with somebody with a machine gun or throwing grenades, or whether it's the person has met hell in their own psyche. It's the cracking open and the horror and the challenge, the emergency that the person has. That's being present with that. That's the work. So it's not the story. It's not why people have this experience. It's not what happened to them. It's how they are in that experience, and how present can we be in that. And the work that I've been doing in Portugal, we've been seeding it in lots of other countries. I have an organization in Ireland called Psycare Ireland, where we've trained young people to be involved with this. And we train people every year. Our organization in Ireland is only 2 years old, and we've trained 130 people to be able to do this kind of work at festivals here in Ireland. But at Boom Festival in Portugal, we train people. With every episode of the festival, we train people to go around the world. And there are people doing, and we call it Psycare, PSY care. So Psycare, originally the idea came from psychedelic care. Psychedelic, is a word that's really misunderstood. People think about psychedelic in terms of fashion, but it came in the 50s from trying to describe substances like mescaline, like LSD, that open people's consciousness. And it's from the Greek psychedelic. It's like mind manifesting. There are substances that are useful to expand the mind. A wonderful psychiatrist, Stanislav Grof, who's done huge work in this. Stan Grof spoke and he said, psychedelics are to the psychiatrist and the psychologist what the microscope is to a biologist, or a telescope is to an astronomer. They're tools to understand the mind. So this is the world. So psychedelic in its essence is something about mind expanding. So these were tools long before they became tools of hippies and drugs on the street. These were tools that revolutionized psychiatry. In the 50s and early 60s, the world of psychiatry and all of that world was completely opened up. And these were tools for medicine. They were demonized, and they've been demonized for about 50 years. And more recently, now people are realizing again the potential that's in these substances for healing. So substances like psilocybin, from magic mushrooms, LSD, ecstasy, MDMA, all of these substances, long before they ever became street drugs, were used for healing. And for me, the intensity of the experience, so maybe an 8-hour experience with LSD or a 5-hour experience with psilocybin, these are very intense experiences, and they're very hard on the nervous system. So if people have these experiences without preparing for them, without having a proper holding while people are having the experience and proper integration afterwards, these incredibly powerful substances that can be wonderfully useful for healing, can become absolutely terrible things, can become things that can become really dangerous. And I've learned an awful lot from my colleagues in the different indigenous traditions, particularly in the Amazon, where people use substances like you mentioned, ayahuasca. There are lots of other plants that are used in the Amazon, but these are not done casually. People are prepared for long periods of time before they take it. They're supported by somebody who's caring for them while they're under the influence. And a lot of work is done helping people integrate the experience. So this is a big piece of work, and it's not for the faint-hearted. I'm a homeopath. So I thought, wow, we need to make remedies from these things. So I made remedy from MDMA, ecstasy. There are a number of versions of ayahuasca. I've made one of them that's available from Helios. It's called ayahuasca with my name Hammond on it, and these are substances that are massively useful for working with people in these non-ordinary states. People use these substances to go into these states of mind consciously. But if people, through trauma or through life experiences, are thrown into these states of mind without being properly prepared for it, these can become crises in their lives. So these are God-given gifts for me. In the tradition in the Amazon, ayahuasca, San Pedro, lots of these different substances, they're called master plants. They're called sacraments. And they're treated as the plants of the gods. These are seen in a very different way than all the other different plant medicine. So they're seen as very special. And I think it's an incredible privilege for me as a homeopath to be able to use what are actually sacred plants to do the work of healing, to deal with help people deal with these incredibly challenging states of mind, and to do it gently, instead of having one of the most intense experiences of your life over 8 hours, taking the remedy gently over a period of time. People move through the experiences, but do it in a gentle way. And I love Hahnemann's idea to rapid, gentle, permanent as the goals of healing. I'm really interested in doing things rapidly, but gently. So people in these extreme states of mind, they're in places of terror, of horror. They're ungrounded, they're disconnected from their body, they're disconnected from normal experiences. These remedies gently help people to come back to themselves. So they're at festivals, I use these remedies often in acute potencies, often in high potencies, because people are having an acute experience. But often these experiences, if they're not dealt with while people are having the acute experience, they can be ending up having a chronic state of dissociation, of depersonalization. And they present to a doc and they got the label. They're already there, psychotic, they're schizophrenic, and then they're on the treadmill of medication and everything else. If we deal with people while they're having their acute experience, we can help to make sure these experiences don't become chronic. So this is a wonderful opportunity we have. And this is the time to work with folks who are having really acute experiences. We can help them to release something of those experiences.
I
Now,
have to mention here.
I just want one comment here. Spiritual emergency, the term comes from transpersonal psychology, and working with people through the emergency, there's a new term comes on, a spiritual emergence. So for people who have managed to work and integrate their experience of emergency, a new way of being comes. So this is how people tell me their night of hell has become the opening to a whole new way of being in the world. If we can support people in their most extreme states of emergency, we can not only help them through those difficult experiences, but we can help them at a deeper level and help them a new way of being to emerge from it, a new way of healing. And my God, we need this at the moment. We need new ways of being with all of this stuff. We have thousands of years of doing the same old shit. You know, we need a new way of emerging. And for me, this is one of the greatest gifts that homeopathy has to offer. I was introduced to homeopathy back in the 70s, and one of my main teachers, a guy called Martin Miles in England, he said homeopathy is a tool for spiritual evolution. And this is why I do homeopathy. It's a tool to help people evolve. And people having the greatest challenge have the greatest potential for healing. And I believe this is our work, and I'd be very happy to support anyone who feels called to do this work with me.
Thank you so much for this introduction, Declan. I wanted to share and even to dedicate this our conversation to those homeopaths who are working with these people now.
Absolutely.
And they are days and nights with people who need their help. And the experience we have to receive, to acknowledge, to try our best instruments in these so-called new circumstances. This is very, very needed one. So I would like to ask from what you would start. These people, as you say, tribe communities, they are gathering together almost every day. They see each other, and most of them didn't hear about homeopathy, and they are enveloped by other practitioners and health care cares, and in this state, according to your experience, what should be done, and how we can help with your huge knowledge, with huge experience of your colleagues and maybe even organizations?
The first thing that comes to mind is look after yourself. To do this work, you need to stay well. And well, I put in inverted commas. How can you be well in an environment like this? But to stay resourced, to stay grounded, to stay present, to stay in your heart. This is the prerequisite to do this kind of work. We're sitting with people, we're staying present with them. If we're tired, if we're drained, if we're stressed, if we're angry, if we're frustrated, if we're feeling revengeful, we can't do this work. We can't be present with people if we're not present, relaxed in our body, our belly soft, our heart open. If we can't do, that's the prerequisite of doing these things. It's not having a good lot of remedies. It's being present at that. Now, in an ideal world, we would all be like that all of the time. But there are times when I can't do that. I need to rest. I need to look after myself. I realize I've been working for 10, 12, 15 hours. I haven't taken a rest. Pay attention to your own well-being as a practitioner. This is the first step. And really, it's something that we're, as homeopaths, I have to say, we're very bad at this. We sacrifice, and we sacrifice. And that's a carcinosin picture. You know, we are a cancerous profession. We, as carers, we offer our hearts and we sacrifice ourselves for the good of others. That's not work here. If that's not sustainable, what I would really invite what's happening now is something we need to be able to sustain ourselves. This is not something that we're going to resolve in the next days or weeks. We need to stay as well as we can over these next weeks, months, and years and decades. So to commit yourself to your own well-being, for me, is absolutely essential. The other thing I think we need to keep in mind, many of my colleagues, I'm not a medical practitioner, I'm not a medical doctor. Many of my colleagues are and will be. I have to say that when I see people who are in these extreme states of mind, and I see them at festivals and I see them in other situations, when people present to medics and especially to psychiatrists, they present with extreme states of mind. They're often prescribed medications, antipsychotics, anti-anxieties. Now, those drugs can be good first aid drugs, but the problem for me, it's often in busy practices that people prescribe these kind of medications because of pressure and whatever else. But if you don't really understand the patient and you can't be able to prescribe individually, you're going to do a lot of damage. People are traumatized. People are coming with deep trauma. That trauma needs to be expressed and released. If they can't express and release it, what you're doing, the acute trauma becomes chronic trauma. And the chronic trauma gets transmitted. If we can't transform this suffering, it gets transmitted. It gets transmitted to our families, our communities, to our children. And this is how trauma perpetuates trauma. And you, as you well know, this goes on for generations and generations. This ends when we can support people releasing the trauma. Psychiatric drugs block the expression of that. So that I understand there are times in extreme situations when these substances are used, but please be careful, and please be careful of them being used too casually. They can help in extreme situations temporarily. Unfortunately, in the treatment of people in these kind of states, people are given these medications over periods of time, and then the effects of the medication adds to the trauma. It locks the expression of the trauma and adds new levels to trauma.
Sorry, Declan, we have a siren here. I will be in 2 minutes, in 5 minutes back, okay? So sorry for interrupting your flow of thoughts, but this is a reality. And
Sure.
silence coming. And maybe this is a question I wanted to ask you anyhow. These deeply traumatized people are having these sirens and other influences reminds them of being traumatized, and this is a re-traumatization is going on. So before we will come back to these points you mentioned, I would like to ask you to relate to how to take care to prevent them from being re-traumatized more and more by me.
Gosh. You know, we're blessed with lots of different ways of prescribing remedies. And over the years, I found a way to prescribe homeopathy most effectively for me is taking daily doses. I have been fascinated following the whole life experience of Samuel Hahnemann and the way he developed the different ways of prescribing. And his final ways of prescribing were what he called the 50 millennium, the LM potencies. And for me, this is a great way of working because it involves people taking the remedies on a daily basis. It's a gentle way of working. It becomes like a spiritual practice. For me, when I have my patients taking their remedy, they know what they're taking, and I tell them why they're taking it. They're taking it to release the trauma. They're taking it to bring themselves back in their body. They're taking it to integrate their experience. And on a daily basis, when they take it, it's like an affirmation for them. It's a practice of reconnecting with themselves. Now, the remedy, of course, taking the remedy, the energy of the remedy resonates in that part of their body, so it brings them back to themselves. But it helps them cognitively. If so, I ask people to sit with the remedy, to connect with the reason they're taking it, and to take it with that as a purpose. So they know what and why they're taking it. So that really helps people to keep in the process of healing. They'll be triggered. Life will trigger them. There'll be maintaining causes. There'll be things that will activate the trauma. But if they're on a regular basis coming back to themselves and taking the remedy on the regular basis in this way, they're actively involved with the process of healing and releasing the trauma. So it minimizes the effects of things like, obviously I don't have sirens going on regularly here where I live in Ireland, but we all have triggers, maintaining causes, things that will activate our traumas, and working with the remedies in this way for me. And people who have really extreme states, I'll have them taking their drops. I usually have patients taking 30 ml bottles of their drops and sometimes taking it 2, even 3 times a day. So if this extreme triggers are there, if people are still in environments where they're being triggered, then we need to take the remedies more frequently. So the old way of prescribing, the Kentian way, where we give 1 dose of a very high potency medicine, that's wonderful. And it has huge limitations for me. Most of our lives, we have to deal with triggers. We have to deal with various things that throw us out of balance, stress of our lives in the normal situation. And of course, normal in Israel and with sirens is very different than normal in my life. But there are triggers there in everyone's life. So being able to repeat the remedies and the dosage as frequently as we need to do it, this really helps. So I don't have a protocol of they should take it this amount, or they should take it every day or every week. I have my patients take it, and their response to the remedies, they can say, oh, yes, I took my dose in the morning and I felt myself in peace for about 12 hours, but then it came to night again and I started having these nightmarish experiences. The siren went off, something happened, I saw something on TV and I'm triggered again. So we get, okay, so you get 12 hours from it. Okay, so repeat it every 12 hours. Or I get it every about 8 or 9 hours, so repeat it. So I don't have a personal protocol. I allow my patients' response to the drops tell me how frequently they need it. So my patients will need it at different times. One of the great aspects of this is it helps me to fine tune my prescribing to each individual situation. And what's really important, it allows my patients to, oh, I need the drops. So I work from a place that my patients know what they need. So I encourage them to be actively involved with their healing. They notice, oh, I get 12 hours of this remedy. Okay, great. Oh, I'm getting 18 hours of it. And we'll talk and we'll adjust the dosage. But it's a dialogue between the patients and myself. I don't have to decide what the person needs. I listen to the person and have them tell me how frequently and how often they need the dosage of the remedy. So this is a way of managing it. Of course, there'll be triggers. It's life. And life, obviously, in Tel Aviv is different than life in Dublin. But there are triggers everywhere. And if we're traumatized and if our nervous system is in such an intensely challenged state, triggers will be there. So we need to manage those. And for me, the best way of managing it is, I should just suggest it there, yeah.
Thank you for this comment. It's very important. And we will talk a little bit more in details about our prejudice, how often you have to prescribe a remedy, and but this was a very good example for this. I'm coming back to your list and my question. You mentioned as an answer to my question what should be done and how we can support homeopaths who are doing this sacred work, divine work. You mentioned two things till now. First of all, to be present and to be well. And the second is to try not to fall to a trap of psychiatrists and psychiatric prescriptions, because they are, in most of the cases, decay. So these were 2 points. Let us go more in details.
What more do you want to hear?
You had so much flow of the thoughts, so I'm trying to bring you back to your flow. You said be well, try not to use psychiatry's prescriptions, and then maybe something related to homeopathy.
You know, the essence of what I'm talking about is very, very simple, you know, but in practice, it's very, very hard. It's easy to say, be present and be compassionate and open your heart. But this is a 24 hours a day practice.
Yeah.
So, and my practice for my patient is when I meet my partner and she's saying something to me and I go, oh, reacting. Oh, that's a reaction. That's not an open-hearted response. That's not staying present. So this is a spiritual practice for me, being present, opening the heart. This is a job not just to do when I'm with my patients. In fact, that's a very focused way of me doing. When I spend 8 hours a day sitting in front of patients, I have to be really present to do that. But if I'm not practicing presence, if I'm not practicing meeting the challenges with my belly soft, with my heart open, with my mind quiet, I'm not going to be able to do it with my patients. So it's very simple to say it, But to do it, that's a lifetime work.
Kind of everyday exercises you have to go through.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you know, when I'm sitting with my patient, you know, Hahnemann says it all. He said, being the unprejudiced observer. Now, I'm always interested in Hahnemann's work, but I'm fascinated that in 53 years of his working, you know, he had 6 editions of the Organon, you know, and I imagine from 1843 to 2023, how many editions of the Organon we'd move beyond. We would be in a very different place. You know, Hahnemann was continually looking to develop the best possible way of doing it. And for me, this is the spirit of Hahnemann, to constantly try to find the best way of doing it. Oh, Hahnemann did this, or Kent did this. They did that 150 years ago. What do we need to do now? We need to respond. We need to be homeopathic to the circumstances we have now. We need to be flexible. We need to move beyond our prejudice about how homeopathy should be prescribed. Oh, are you a classical homeopath? Do you prescribe according to Scholten, Shankaran, Yakir? You know, all of these, yeah, they're all different tools to be open to doing whatever you need to do. We need to get over our prejudice. We need to respond to the circumstances of the present with tools that we have now. We can't do the homeopathy that was done in 1843 and expect to get the good results now. We need to, with the spirit of Hahnemann, to adapt and to adjust and to be homeopathic to the times we're in at the moment. And when I have my patients needing to take the remedies on a regular basis, you know, taking them very frequently or whatever the doses, I'm responding to my remedy. Sorry, I'm responding to my patient's needs. I'm not prescribing from the basis of my own personal philosophy. I'm not prescribing from my own personal protocol or system. I'm allowing my patients and their state and their symptoms to dictate how I respond. That's the essence of homeopathy. Hahnemann says in every individual case. That statement goes right through the Organon. In every individual case, to have a system, to have a protocol, to have a way of doing it is not homeopathy, as far as I'm concerned. It's like, get over whatever restrictions you have and allow your patients to dictate the kind of response, the kind of remedies, and maybe more than one remedy, and the kind of potencies that the patients need. That's so important for me. I experience that many homeopaths, when I meet them at conferences or when I do seminars, and say, oh, but that's not the system. That's not what Hahnemann did. That's not what Kent did. That's not what, and they mention other more modern people. You know, it's like every one of those people were doing the best they could for their patients at that time. We're in a unique situation at a unique time. And we need to respond. If we're going to get the best out of homeopathy, we need to be able to be flexible enough, fluid enough, present enough to meet our patients in the challenge they have now, not with tools that are 150 years old, not with ways of working. You know, Hahnemann didn't live in Tel Aviv with sirens going all the time. You know, he lived in a different culture. The challenge is different. We need to respond in an appropriate way now. And that's, for me, a big challenge we have as homeopaths, because we get very stuck in our ways of doing things. I've been criticized by not being classical enough, by not using this system or that system. The only system I have is, how can I be present with my patient in their circumstances? And how can I prescribe what they need in these circumstances? And that needs all sorts of different tools. You know, all these wonderful different homeopaths, and we've so many people coming up with different systems. Like, it's a big box of tools, and these are different tools. But at the end of the day, it's not about the system you work with. It's about how present you can be to yourself, being present with your patient. and really hearing and feeling what the patient needs.
Thank you so much, Declan. And you know, all this, our meeting is so spontaneous, and we decided to record without preparation, and this is kind of slow. I would like to ask you to give an example of one of the cases. You have hundreds and thousands, but one of the examples you can stress on a basic of this case or something related to this case, these methodological and very important statements you made. Just one case, because as far as I understood, we can ask from you much more than one example, and you are willing, you are open to help with your knowledge, and we will discuss afterwards how we can use this knowledge in our circumstances. But for this conversation, just to stress what we talked about by case.
All right. Okay. So during COVID times, so 3 years ago, this lady, she got in touch with me from Madrid, and she was sitting, let's call her Sophia. Let's give her a name. So Sophia, it's not her real name, so I'd like to protect her name. She's given me permission to talk about her case because it was remarkable. I worked with her for 10 months. When I met her, she had been in trauma for 5 years. She had gone a completely different context from Israel, but she had gone to a meditation retreat. She had gone to yoga and had done an intense experience. During the retreat, she started to have strange sensations in her body. Her body started to shake and to tremble. And these sensations got worse and more intense, and she presented to the doctors, and they thought she had multiple sclerosis. So they did the tests and they found she didn't have. But she started to get extremely full of anxiety about it. She was put on benzodiazepines. She had really very difficult experience with the benzodiazepines. She started to get more and more anxious. She started to get into crisis. She ended up having a diagnosis of psychosis. So when I met her, she said she was on 9 different medications. Antipsychotics, anti-anxieties, lithium to balance things out. In the previous 5 years, she had gone from one medication to the other. She had been taken off the benzodiazepines, and it triggered even more of the states she had. It activated the spasms, jerkings, and she became really deeply suicidal. She had, in the 5 years, she had 29 suicide attempts. She showed me her wrists. She had cut all the way down. So when I spoke to her first, she looked dirty. She was in her night clothes, dressing gown on a sofa. So she said she couldn't get off the sofa. She was terrified. She was hearing voices. She was seeing things that other people couldn't see. She was terrified. She said, I just want to die. I want to die. This is terrifying. This is overwhelming. I can't feel things. Everything I feel, feels like it's overwhelming. It's too much. I just want to die. She went to sleep at night and she had horrible dreams of nightmares, people trying to kill her. She opened her eyes and she saw demons coming. She saw people trying to kill her. And she said she wanted to kill herself to protect herself from this. She was talking to me and she was shaking and her body was tricky. She said this, since the benzodiazepines, she said she's been having these kind of spasms in her body. She said, whenever I try to do something, it becomes too much. Whenever I think of a particular thought, the thought becomes bigger and bigger and more scary, and I become terrified. I feel a little bit nervous, and that nervousness becomes massive. So we talked, my biggest concern was that she was going to kill herself. So I said, one of the questions I ask my patients, once we've decided to work with each other and we decided to prescribe, I ask the person, when do you feel you need to see me again? And she said, I need to see you next week. So we worked every week based on the patient telling me what she needs. I mentioned earlier that I really work from the place that deep in themselves, we all know what we need. And I really like to encourage my patients to feel not what they think, but what they feel they need. So we worked every week for a few months. Now, the remedy wasn't a great, amazing piece of prescribing for me. It was a clear remedy picture of Agaricus muscaria. She whatever she was feeling, she would have huge hysterical outbursts, and she would feel like she wanted to smash things or smash herself. So she had all of the symptoms were very good. There was no brilliant prescribing, but what was really important for me was I said, listen, between now and next week, I need you to make an agreement. And we had a symbolic shaking of hands through the screen. I need to ask you to promise that you won't kill yourself between now and the next week. So, and I said, I talked about what happened, and I said, what do the doctors say is going on? They said, I've gone mad. I've become psychotic. And that it's a chronic condition that I'm going to be on the medication for the rest of my life. And when she had told me what had happened to her, I said, the spiritual literature is filled with experiences of people having a Kundalini awakening when they do very intense spiritual practice that awakens an energy within. And if the body and the nervous system is not prepared for that, it becomes overwhelmed. So it becomes a crisis. So I used the term that I used earlier. So this is not psychosis. This is not madness. This is a spiritual emergency. And she said at the end, and I have a beautiful video of her after 10 months, and she said, that was a really important part, that I normalized it, that I didn't treat her that she was mad, that I had a context for her. And that helped her really to understand that this is a spiritual emergency brought on by intense experience, aggravated by the side effects of the benzodiazepines and the antipsychotics, but initially was provoked by intense spiritual practice. Now, this happens a lot for people who do intense work. If people are not prepared, if the nervous system is not prepared for this intense energy rising in the system, the nervous system becomes overwhelmed. This is what happens in any kind of situation, external or internal, when the nervous system becomes overwhelmed. It can't self-regulate. So this is the understanding of that was really, really helpful for her. So I worked more or less only with that one remedy. She tried 4 times to kill herself during the time, and really tried. The intensity of the symptoms, the pain that she was suffering in her mind was so hard. Now, in these places of distress, we can't process these things in our mind because we can't make sense of these. They're intense feelings, intense emotions. We need to come back into the body. So the real challenge, if we're going to process it and if we're going to release the intense experience, they have to be done through the body. So I encouraged her to look after her body, to take care of her body, to make sure she ate, because she had lost 20 kilos during those 5 years, and she looked like, completely skin and bone. So over the periods of the months, she came through, and she came out the other side of this. The only remedy she had a couple of doses of syphiline, because at a couple of times she felt, I can't resist the feelings of killing myself, destroying myself. She pulled her hair out She tore her clothes. She said, I can't resist these feelings. So I gave her a few high doses of syphilinum as intercurrent remedies. But only over those 10 months, all she had was that remedy. But the agaricus. But the really important thing, and she spoke very, very well about it at the end, was the fact that I could stay present with her while she was screaming, while she was literally mad on the screen in front of me, that I was able to stay there with her. And back to what I was saying earlier, the presence. And the final, she made a video for me at the end of the 10 months, and she was in her summer dress. She hadn't been out of her house for years, and she was staying in her parents' house. She couldn't eat, she couldn't feed herself, she couldn't wash herself. She had been reduced to being somebody who was completely and utterly disabled. The end of it was her on holidays, and she had a sleeveless top on her, and she said, look, and there were scars. She said, I'm wearing these with pride. These are my scars. These are my war wounds. These are a sign to myself and the world that I've survived. And she said, I haven't just survived. I'm living my life now in a way I never lived before. She said, I'm feeling more sensitive to myself. I'm meditating again, but I'm having experiences of meditation. I feel God in my heart, God in my life in a way I've never felt before. She had gone from a spiritual emergency to a spiritual emergence. 10 months. And it was just, at the end of it, I recorded it on Zoom, and you could, every so often I would go, and my picture just appeared on the screen with tears in my eyes, just listening to her describing it. But it was the quality of presence. It wasn't an amazing prescription. Like I couldn't show that and say, look how clever I am. I gave this very tiny remedy that no one's ever given before, and nobody's ever proven it, or it came from the cosmos. This is a remedy we've had in our homeopathy forever, But the quality, but the work, and I really have to say, well done to me too. The work that I did was staying with her in the places of deep, deep, deep distress. And I know I keep repeating that, but this is the greatest gift we give our patients, not how clever our prescribings are, it's so interesting. I did a presentation a few years ago to the New Zealand Conference of Homeopathy, and I had a 20-year period where I had taught before in New Zealand, and I look back over 20 years of prescribing. What did I learn in 20 years? And I look back at cases that I had done 20 years ago, and I was shocked how bad prescribing they were. And I looked at it, and it was like, that's obviously the wrong remedy. And I looked at how did the person do? Really, really well. Looking back 20 years back, it was the wrong remedy. But what was the result? A good result. So the presence we give our patients, we don't put enough attention to this in our training. We don't give ourselves enough credit. We get so much caught up with trying to find the remedy, and it all been about the remedy. This is what it's about. Relationship, a healing relationship. That's the work.
And the results were because of your good intentions. Absolutely. And how to stay present with people in the most challenging spaces. Like I keep repeating them, but to be honest, the only thing I'd really love people to take from this video is to encourage you to stay present in the most challenging situations, to allow yourself to hear things you don't want to hear, to be able to allow yourself to feel things you don't want to feel. Lean into that and allow yourself to feel that. That is a priceless gift for your patients if you can bring that to your patient. And this was a priceless gift you gave us. Declan, sir, thank you so much. So much.
And this is a real surprise. You know, we're having this, I mentioned to Roman earlier this morning, we had the conversation initially because one of my patients cancelled, and just early morning, a second patient's cancelled. So I have a space opened up that we have the space to do this. A God-given space. Synchronicity, as we both know, is, you know, Einstein made a beautiful comment. Synchronicity is God's way of staying anonymous.
Yes.
So we've created a little bit of magic that's been opened up. So thank you.
Thank you very much.